Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give a few seconds at the top for people to join us and tell other people and let them know what's going on. But yeah, hello and welcome to this webinar from IFOL on vendor validation, best practices preventing fraud in 2026. Now, we all know payment fraud is on the rise, and finance and procurement teams are under more pressure than ever, it seems, to move fast and stay secure. So today's session is all about those kind of applicable ways to strengthen your know your supplier controls, validate vendors effectively, and reduce fraud risk without slowing down any operations. So the aim for today is that you'll leave the session with some practical, real world and usable tips to help you in your day-to-day work. I'm Jay Videlingham and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by a great panel of experts this afternoon. Firstly, we have Conrad Smith, co-founder and CEO of Graphite Connect. Conrad has over 30 years of procurement experience and has led major global transformations across procurement, IT, and finance. We've also got Luke Wolf, solutions engineer at Graphite Connect, where his role is effectively helping organizations to bridge the gap between those technical requirements and real business value. And we have Louise Graham, COO at IFOL and head of Institute, a background working in finance operations for organizations like Costa Coffee, Santander, and the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office. So thank you all for being here. And before we get into the discussion proper, we'd love to hear from you guys, the audience, as well. It's a two-way street today. So put any questions and comments you might have into the chat and we will address them and come back to you. So firstly, just to make sure you're all paying attention and wide awake, we're going to start with a quick poll to get a sense of where everyone is today. So before we get into the thing as proper, let's launch our first poll. So hopefully you guys can see all this. Are your stakeholders happy with your vendor onboarding process? So single choice here for people. So yes, they tell us they are, no, or no idea. So we'll give a few seconds for these results to come in, but it's really useful just to get a bit of a sense of the lay of the land, really, how people are getting on and the situation where you are now. So let's just give it a few seconds for things to get your votes in. So are your stakeholders happy with your vendor onboarding process? So one choice each. Yes, they tell us they are. No, or no idea. So it looks like most people have voted now, so I'll put that up so hopefully everyone can see those results. And it looks like the no ideas have it in terms of the majority, 45% no idea, 36% say yes, they tell us they are, and 19% for no. So I suppose let's go to the panel and talk about this. Conrad, let's go to you first. Are you surprised by this?
Not really. I mean, the data that we see indicates most people are using, old legacy processes. About half the organizations typically use email and attachment spreadsheets, whatever. Sometimes that's data collected by the stakeholders themselves, which if I was a stakeholder and I had to chase down a whole bunch of data, I would be a little bit unhappy with that. But again, maybe isolated. So not a big surprise to me. Um, yes is a great answer. And so I'd love to have people pipe in a little bit, share best practices of what makes that difference. But yeah, this is super important, particularly as it relates to the topic today of supplier bank data and fraud.
Okay, and Luke, for you, you do a lot of that kind of dealing with organizations. Does this borne out by what you see day to day? People just have no idea.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. It can be a little nerve-wracking to collect the information because yeah, no one wants to see a negative result. At one of my past roles when I was working in procurement, we did an NPS survey, and it came back as negative. It was like a -3 or something like that. And it was anyway, it was embarrassing to say the least. But then we were able to actually make changes to improve that score. But yeah, I think that's a good starting point. It's like don't run away from the feedback. You need to collect the feedback to make sure you know where you stand so that you can start making improvements. But yeah, not totally surprised by those results. But yeah, that's something that organizations should definitely address.
And Louise, for you, were you kind of surprised by this, or did you think more people would be in the yes campaign?
I thought more people would be in the yes, to be honest. But I think what's really important to mention is that if you're in a finance ops team or a procurement team or a P2P process, actually your stakeholders are just trying to get on with their business, right? They're trying to onboard. They just want to deal with their suppliers. They meet someone. They might get some great quotes from them. They want to get on with it. And so actually the job of procurement and finance ops is to facilitate that. But actually, if you have no idea what they think because you haven't gone and asked them, then perhaps you should go and ask them, because expectation management is such an important part of stakeholder relationships, right? If you go out and say to your stakeholders, you know what, when you meet a supplier and you get a great quote from them and you'd love to do business with them, that's absolutely fine. Come and engage with us as soon as possible, because actually we can help you. We can help you and we can talk you through the process, and we can make sure that you understand all the due diligence that has to take place beyond just setting up a supplier. Because understandably, people in sales and marketing and operational roles, they just want to get on and do their jobs, quite rightly. And so I think expectation management is really important. And if they understand all the processes involved in setting up a supplier, and they understand how long it's going to take typically, so you've got SLAs with them, and you say, if you send it to us on a Monday, we'll get it done by whatever date it is. You're going to have better feedback and PR as a finance operations or procurement department. And that's what we all want, right? Good relationships.
Yeah,
Luis,
you mentioned. Sorry, Conrad, go.
no, I was just going to say, I think one of the contributing factors here is most people in the organization aren't regular users of procurement. I mean, there are super users that are in there often, and we have relationships with them, and they, we train them, we help them, and they do what you're saying. But many of people that are buying are sort of once a year kind of folks, and they don't know. I mean, I've been in procurement for over 30 years now, and it has really changed what this process looks like. And I'd say it's changing more and more, and it's more complicated than ever. So most people wouldn't anticipate that it could take weeks and weeks to get through a process in a company. So they kind of plan their project and they do their stuff without understanding what you're talking about, like the process. So yeah, it does get very complicated, and that gap between expectations and reality, creates all sorts of challenges reputationally for our business and procurement, but also, just for business results themselves.
Yeah, and Louise mentioned something about the speed of the process there. Luke, is that something that you see evidence of, that stakeholders feel that onboarding can be too slow?
Absolutely. And what we see a lot of the time, it's either, hey, the speed is good, but they're skipping a lot of steps and the security's not there, or vice versa, right? Where it's like, hey, we're going through all the checks, and to Conrad's point, it's like they don't quite understand the process, so they're frustrated. But speed is something we hear. I mean, everyone wants it to go faster, right? I don't think I've talked to anyone that's like, oh yeah, it's a snap of your finger and the suppliers are onboarded. I mean, right? Goals, that's where we want to get. But yeah, we hear that again every day, right? When we're talking to different companies.
Yeah, I suppose help us understand a little bit about some of the headaches as to why that's the case. Why do you think people feel that the process is too slow?
Yeah, so there's so many steps. Conrad mentioned it's just growing in complexity, right? So onboarding isn't just, oh, we're going to collect a W-9, we're going to collect the banking and get it uploaded into the system. Now onboarding is, hey, did we pull in privacy and security and what other compliance do we need to do? We need to do sanctions checks and we need to validate the banking. And, that's when we get into kind of the fraud mitigation piece. But there's so many steps in there to protect the company that, again, most people have no idea about, and either they're trying to skirt the process and go around, which is introducing more risk, or they're stuck there sitting and waiting for weeks and sometimes months, to get a supplier, fully onboarded.
Hey, Jay, if you do like a Six Sigma analysis of this process, and we've done that, what you see is that there's sort of, from a Pareto perspective, 4 or 5 things that really drive the speed thing here. The first is we send a lot, like Luke is saying, we send a lot of requirements to the supplier. So often, I mean, when I started, it was like 30 questions on a half a piece of PDF, and you're good to go. But that's changed now. So it's not uncommon to see 2 or 3 or 400 items requested, data documents, all of that in the process. So item number one is the suppliers are slow to do, like, it is. I can tell you as a procurement practitioner turned, now I'm a supplier to many of you in the business of procurement. When I get these forms and they come in, it is daunting how much information we're asking. And when you're asked to fill these out, whether it comes in the form of an RFP or it comes in the form of one of these onboarding questionnaires, there isn't a person in your company that can answer all those questions. And so you're kind of scrambling around and pulling everybody together, and you're doing this for 10 customers at the same time. So the supplier's response time being slow is number one on the list. The second one is your own internal stakeholders are the ones that dreamed up these 75 questions each to ask. And now I don't want to say they're regretting it, but they've definitely created this big workload that's coming back onto their desk. So they are now trying to process hundreds of questions and scoring. And most people don't have any automation to help them do that, right? They're just kind of digesting these spreadsheets and these documents. The third thing is the suppliers often send back bad data, whether it's commercial data or some of this risk and due diligence. So now we're in this loop of, hey, let's go validate all this data. So many organizations we talk to are manually putting their data into their procurement systems. And then there's this topic of today, number 5, which would be fraud. So since this happens, most organizations are now picking up the phone and calling back the vendor. So there's this big long process, and at the end, now we're going to institute a phone tag back and forth until we can finally talk to the right person and make sure we can trust the data. You stack all that stuff together, and you got to hire people to do that, right? Because it's just this cycle of work of tracking and getting it done. And one of you, I don't remember if it was Luke or you, Jay, or that talked about the speed of business, but business is getting really fast, right? Everywhere we look, these technologies and services are ramping into our lives super fast. Yet my view of procurement is we're slowing down. And that's why I'm not surprised when I don't see everyone say, hey, yes, I'm super happy, because they want to move at the speed of business, and we're kind of moving backwards right now.
Yeah, but I suppose Louise, you might be able to speak to this. There's a bit of a balancing act, isn't there? Because obviously
Yeah.
speed is one thing, but you need to kind of balance out the compliance and risk elements too.
Absolutely. And I think this is a phrase that anyone who's ever worked with me will have heard me use many times, but I think it's really important. A supplier account is a gateway to your bank account. So once there's a supplier account set up with bank details, invoices are going to flow through it. It has to be set up correctly right at the beginning in the first place. You have to do the due diligence, and it's no good just saying it's not important, because it really is. It's the gateway to your bank account. So I think once people in the business understand that, and I think, like I said, managing people's expectations and saying, if you're going to engage with a supplier, get involved with procurement and finance ops really early on, because they can start doing some of the due diligence. You can do credit checks, and you can do some checks before forms are filled in, if appropriate, and it isn't in every organization. So I think what I would say to all those people who said, I don't know what my stakeholders think about the speed of vendor onboarding, I'd go and find out. And then I'd manage their expectations. And I'd say, actually, this is how long it generally takes, and this is what we need from you. And also, this is what we need from the supplier. As Conrad said, suppliers I've often been in a situation where a vendor setup or a data team is being chased for supplier setup, and it turns out the supplier hasn't filled in the form, or they haven't signed it, or they haven't put their bank details in, or whatever. So they need to sort of engage really well with the process as well, I'd say.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring in a question now we've had from one of the audience, Karina Rivera, who's posed a question, and they say we currently require a signed W-9, most recent IRS version. We require a vendor request form to obtain contact information. We vet the information and tin match via Sovos. We then use DocuSign to obtain ACH bank information. And she asked, what other steps can she use to embrace for fraud prevention in the AI world? Which of you guys wants to take that one?
I'd love to just make a very quick comment on that, which is, again, I've banged on about this for years, but with bank account validation, where possible, make the phone call. It's a really small human interaction that's really important for fraud prevention. And I'm sure we can talk about business email compromise and fraud a bit later on in this webinar, but I would say that's important.
Yeah, okay, that human touch there from Louise. Conrad, do you want to take this one? What steps can people take to embrace fraud prevention in the AI world?
Well, that you tacked that on at the end, and I've just got to say how stunningly, quickly the world's changing from an AI perspective, and how much AI is enabling these bad actors to show up in ways. I remember when I training, 10 or 15 years ago, it was like, look for the weird fonts and the bad spellings and all these other issues now, right? Anybody in any country and any level of education can pump something into Chat GPT and come back with something that's a pretty elegant email that you're going to have a very difficult time, using those tips and tricks. That's just like as one signal that the things coming to us are different. The Sorry, I don't remember if you said the lady's name, or the person's name was Claire with that question, but
Karina, sorry.
Karina. So I would just a lot of what we kind of feel like looks reliable, like, hey, we got a bank document here's a bank letter from the supplier. So we can trust that, that it's maybe on a bank letterhead, or it's a PDF, or it's a canceled check. Like all of us on the line right here, it looks like there's, approaching, 75, 80 people, in conversation with us here. If you put your effort into it, if you've never done it before, within an hour or two, you could create a document that is a very, very official looking, company create fictitious documents. It might have been in the past, but it is not anymore. So I think it's really critical, to Luisa's point, to understand where you have points of vulnerability in the process. And to what you described, it feels like you have a variety of different sort of swivel chair processes working, in tandem. And my encouragement would be, find a solution. By the way, we live and breathe this stuff, but try and bring it together. So at the end of the day, you're going to have these various signals that would indicate trust or validation or readiness. And you want to be able to see that in like a unified scorecard of some sort that says, okay, this is where our process from these 5 different things, whether it's the commercial data or the risk and due diligence. And these are the signals that tells me what level of trust that I have in this data. Because you may have a vendor that you're paying, $1,000 to, and you may have a vendor that you're paying $10 million to. And you're going to have different situations, and you're going to need to have different levels of confidence based on kind of speed versus trust and quality.
Yeah. Luke, any thoughts on that? And sort of it's know your supplier stuff, isn't it, I suppose? How can people embrace fraud prevention?
Yeah, and I think most organizations are very familiar with KYC nowadays, right? So know your customer, but I mean, know your supplier. To Louise's point, I mean, you kind of have to assume at this point in time that emails are compromised. I mean, an email asking to update a bank account, I mean, immediately red flags should go up, right? So what we do at Graphite, we start upstream of actually checking bank ownership, right? That's crucial. But is this person who you think it is, or is it a bad actor, right? Can we check that they are who they say they are? Do we have secondary contacts over there at the supplier that can kind of back up any changes and approve any changes that are made? Can we check identity? And then, doing the bank ownership checks is crucial. But it's really, there's not one silver bullet that's going to be like, oh, I did this check, there's no fraud, right? You have to have kind of this waterfall of validations to make sure, these people are who they say they are. To the W9 or WH, right? This is a legal entity. That's great. That's a good check to do. But then, the bank information. I mean, we've seen valid W9s, legal entities that were set up, and then a bank account that may have just an extra L, right? An extra letter, something different that was set up that was so close that humans are going to miss, right? So bad actors are using AI and automation. You need to be using AI and automation as well to combat that.
Okay, so sort of being alert, isn't it? I suppose is a key thing to all of this.
I'd like to add an example to that, if I may.
Yeah, go for it.
So, in an organisation I worked for, we had an email saying, please change the bank account details. And it was extremely credible. The name of the finance director was correct, the signature looked correct, the date was correct, the address, the registered office, everything looked correct. They had the supplier account number, so they looked extremely credible. And luckily, we made the phone call because it was a supplier to whom we paid £2 million a week. So we made the phone call, and our supplier said, no, we haven't changed our bank. That's a fraud. That's a potential fraud. So had we not made that one phone call, we'd have paid £2 million to a fraudster. We'd have still owed the £2 million to the supplier. And, you know, it just would have been all types of terrible. But there was absolutely nothing about the document that would have aroused suspicion. And we had a fraud team in that organisation who came over and examined it. You know, lots of different people looked at it. The document looked perfect, and they'd been waiting in that supplier's bank account to look for somebody who was going to pay a lot of money every week. They only had to do it once, and they were £2 million up. So yeah. Anyway, that's my little story, which I trot out because it was such a phew. Thank goodness we didn't just take that at face value moment, and thank goodness we made that phone call. Really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's build on that. It sort of ties in with our next poll. So if you're in the audience and you just have a little think about, we're going to go to our next poll now. Bear with me a second while I come back to launch it. So launching the poll question number 2. So it is, how do you verify and validate new vendors? Okay, so it's a one choice each here. So we collect and verify documents using bank callbacks, etc. We use specialized software or services company to validate vendor data. We do tiered risk reviews based on levels of spend with the vendor. The other option is formal audits and on-site inspections. Or there's an option if you have no formal processes in place. So just have a few seconds to read the question and really think about what applies to your situation here. How do you go about verifying and validating new vendors? Again, this was kind of really help us to sort of see where you guys are and see if we can sort of tailor any questions and comments you've got about this. So it looks like most people have voted now, I think. So yeah, it looks like most people are going with. Oh, I'm waiting a sec, but more people are coming in. More people are voting. So I'll go through the options again. How do you verify and validate? Collect and verify documents using bank callbacks, etc. Using specialized software or a services company to validate vendor data. Tiered risk reviews based on level of spend. Formal audits and on-site inspections, or no formal processes. So it looks like most people, 50% of people, say that they collect and verify documents using bank callbacks, etc. So hopefully you guys can see all the results there. And thank you very much for taking part in the poll. It really does help us to shape some of our answers here. So I suppose the panel, what do you think about that? Is that a surprising number, or is that where you think people would have been in this? So
For me,
Conrad, do you want to go first?
yeah. So for me, it lines up with what I would have expected. Luis is talking about these callbacks as best practice. I would agree with that. We're just in the process of renewing our corporate insurance, and there was in the insurance application there was a specific question to this point: do you do callbacks to change bank data? Like the insurance companies that are insuring all of your organizations are expecting this, and this is seen as really the call it the gold standard. The problem with this, though, of course, is it's kind of slow. I mean, frankly. And I'd like to talk once we kind of digest the poll. I'd like to kind of talk a little bit more about how we can look at this in a more sort of Pareto and automated sort of way. But yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see this. And by the way, if you're one of these people that has no formal process, when I left Intel's a huge global company with maybe top 10 in terms of process maturity. I left and I kind of thought that was normal. That was my first company. I was like, oh, this is how companies work. Everything's really mature and organized, and the process is great. And then I went to a smaller organization, and I was like, wow, there's like no process here at all. Like there's all these gaps. Is a much smaller organization. I think we're all in this in our businesses. We got to find ourselves. We talk about the business S curve, right, of maturity and growth. But you got to ask yourself, where are you in your business in terms of that growth curve and what does procurement and process look like. It's a process of maturing. Like the first day a company's set up, it isn't like everything is working. So, and you can't just flip the switch and all of a sudden have, top 10% level process and controls and compliance across the organization. So we're all working to kind of go through transformations in kind of sync with business expectations and resources to do what needs to be done. This is one case where I think there are enough easy ways to address this. As you start building out your process, this is one that definitely needs you need to pay attention to. But don't be ashamed if you're down on the I don't know or no formal process. You're probably in one of these organizations that just needs to invest in that transformation and maturity.
Yeah. And Luke, for you, looks like the sort of the second biggest group is people who are using specialized software services. So that's a step in the right direction, I suppose you'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was even thinking that this is lower than I would have expected, but I'm sure. I mean, it only takes to Louise's point, it takes one fraud event for for major changes to occur, right? So and again, with the trends that we're seeing, I expect this percentage to go up a lot this year and in the very near future because again, yeah, to Conrad's point, starting from no formal process to doing callbacks and looking at documents. I mean, when you're doing 100 of these in a year, 100 new supplier onboards, it's like okay, we can do that. But then you're getting 500, 1,000, 2,000. It's like you got to automate. You got to get tools to help you. And the bigger you are, the bigger you're a target for these bad actors and need a little additional support.
Yeah. And Louise, your thoughts on the poll there?
Interesting what you just said about only one event needs to happen for an organisation to take it seriously. I was asking a colleague some time ago, did you have fraud training in your last large organisation? She said, yeah, we did. And I thought, oh, brilliant, that's great, that's really great. Where did you get that from? And she said, yeah, we did, but we only had it once. We had a business email compromised bank account fraud. So they had bolted the stable door after the horse had bolted for sure. So they had it as a reaction, exactly as you said, Luke. People react. I also think it's interesting that 50%, they say they collect and validate. We can't know, but I wonder how much of that is manual and lots of bits of data from all over the place because that's a lot of work, even if that's not automated in any way, or if that's people actually having to eyeball documents or collect documents or chase suppliers for documents or collate them in one place or put them in a folder or a file or whatever, then that's a lot of manual effort. That's what I'd say. And what you want to avoid is manual effort wherever possible.
Well, you might be talking to vendors in China or, Brazil or all these different languages and cultures, and that callback piece is very burdensome. It gets complicated. It needs to happen. You need to take that step of one form or fashion. But yeah, it is a lot of work.
Yeah. And I actually spoke to a person about getting hold of a big company. I've got a feeling it was Amazon, but don't quote me on it. It might not have been. And there was a change of bank details. They couldn't make the phone call. It was a company that was really difficult to contact by phone, and so they just didn't pay them because actually they knew that they would get in touch to chase the bill, which they did. They got in touch, and the organisation was able to say, we haven't paid you because you've sent us a change of bank details and we haven't been able to verify it. So we're not changing the bank details. But now you've called us because we haven't paid you. Now put us in touch with the person who can validate the bank details,
Love that.
which again is reactive, not proactive. It's not the right way round. But as a last resort, it does work. And it's better than saying we couldn't get hold of someone, so we just changed it. We took it on faith. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, urging a bit of caution there. I also want to bring in actually, we were talking a bit about verification earlier. Another question has come in from an anonymous attendee. Thank you very much for all your questions that you're sending in. And the question is for you guys, Conrad and Luke, and what is the geographical scope that Graphite's bank verification tool can reach, i.e., remote locations in Africa, Asia, or LATM or smaller vendors? Do you have a kind of a steer for this person's question? Is there a geographical limit for graphite?
So
Yeah.
Luke, let me take a stab at it if you would, and
Uh,
then Bill, because I'm sure you'll clarify a few things here. Luke talked about he used the word waterfall, and I think it's really the best practice that I would describe. And Luis, I'd love your feedback here. Is getting actual data back from the bank that says this bank account you have is registered to Jay or to Luke. Like this corporate name and tax ID that you have is the same corporate name and tax ID that we have inside our bank for that particular account. And in some countries, those databases and systems are available. In other countries, they're not, which is probably the core behind the question that came in. It's really important to go, okay, now we're talking about this bank in Indonesia or this company in Indonesia, and I haven't been able to do that level of verification, then let's move to the next step of what might work to verify what we need to go do. So like a sequence, and Luke, maybe you tie in a little bit with what countries in the scope, but having a process that allows you to do first the most automated and the most fast approach and the highest trust, and then start moving down a process. And then at the bottom of that, call it waterfall, the most expensive and the slowest, but still secure largely is what Louis said, which is this phone call. So there are automated systems and data to go through this process. Our hope is that, and what we deliver for our customers is a situation where you can have very, very high level of confidence down through like 98% of your suppliers anywhere in the world based on one step of this waterfall. And then if not, then that takes your 100 phone calls down to 2 phone calls to really change it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. To add on to that, Conrad, I mentioned earlier, there's no silver bullet, right? But if we can get that bank account ownership check, that is extremely helpful, which that's pretty good today in, the United States and Europe. But I mean, Graphite has suppliers, I think in 190 countries today, and we validate this data in all of those countries. So you can imagine it's going to look a little bit different in certain countries. If, hey, we can't do that bank ownership check, but hey, we can check their government ID, or we can, check their validate their tax information, validate their bank documentation, have a second approver, someone at the company with the same email. They're not using a Gmail or a Yahoo, right? They have the corporate email, and we're validating that. So again, we're creating this trust score of all these validations that we're able to do and which ones we aren't. And if we're able to verify them, then great. If not, yeah, that's when, hey, maybe we need to do a callback, and that's 1% of the time instead of 100%. That's a massive improvement.
Yeah. And in terms of that sort of preparedness that a company has, I think you guys have got some case studies of people that you worked with in the past, haven't you, where fraudsters haven't been able to get through that vendor validation system, whether it's wrong domain or anything like that. Do you guys want to share any of that with the companies that have worked with Graphite in the past that you've helped?
Luke, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll go first. So there was one, probably our most interesting example in one of our case studies is, we call it the pistachio thief, because there's a guy that had been arrested years ago for stealing a truckload of pistachios. So again, pretending to be someone else, taking a truckload of pistachios. What he found is, hey, it's a whole lot easier to do this from the comfort of, my living room behind a computer. And so he started, again, with a phishing attack, getting access to an email. And one thing we see a lot is, you might be working with the owner of a company. Well, he's got a secretary or someone else that's doing the onboarding for him. So we had this person say, "Oh yeah, I'm helping out." We'll say Tom here to get this information in. And so we start flagging some things like, hey, we've got the correct tax information, but this guy isn't who we were expecting. And then, we were able to catch with some of our automated validations, like slight details with like banking information. Hey, it's off by, again, like I mentioned before, like a letter, or there's an additional number, or something looks a little bit different. And so, yeah, we dug in. And our team did some extra checks kind of behind the scenes, looked this guy up, because he actually provided his own identification. That's when we found, hey, this guy's been arrested. He's been doing this before. This is not, who he's pretending to be. We got, in contact with the owner of the company. He's like, yeah, I'm not trying to change my bank account. So that was kind of an interesting, case study of, hey, it's not one check, it's several checks that we're doing, and finally saying, there's something wrong here. We're putting this on hold.
The one that jumps out to me is, and I think it highlights a point, Luis, I'm sure you've seen this as well, where when there's people in the process, uh, a bit of urgency, hey, I've tried that system, it's not working, I can't make it work, it's not user friendly, you guys owe me this money, all sorts of mechanisms, whether it's even copying, leadership teams on both sides to kind of bring more credibility to that email and that communication. And in sort of a moment of, hey, I want to do right by this supplier that, they're trying, but it's not working. They make the change in their own system directly instead of going through Graphite and going through all of these checks that Luke's talking about. And boom, money just goes to the wrong person. In my experience, those points of highest vulnerability are where you have a person in the loop that's making a determination about, whether that's a trusted situation, a trusted person, trusted data or not.
Yeah. Sure. So with that in mind, let's go to our final poll of the webinar today, and it's going to be one that you in the audience, you're going to have to look inside yourself and be honest with us and with your fellow attendees, because it is the question of have you experienced fraud yourself or attempted fraud in the past year within your organization? If so, what type was it? Let us know in the comments. And the answers, potential answers are yes, and it was a substantial loss. Yes, but we prevented it. Yes, and we minimized our losses. Or no, we didn't experience any fraud or attempted fraud, brackets, that we know of. So do get your votes in on this and be honest, sort of look inside yourself and think, actually, this is a safe space to share some of this stuff. Have you experienced fraud or attempted fraud in the past in your organization? Do let us know because it's going to really help people to feel if it has happened to you that you're going to be less alone in this. So it looks like a lot of people are getting their answers in. So the potential answers are yes, it was a substantial loss. Yes, but we prevented it. Yes, and we minimized our losses. And the last option was no, we didn't experience any fraud or attempted fraud that we know of yet, I suppose we could add on to that. So it looks like I'll end the poll there. It looks like 53% of people said that they had experienced fraud or attempted fraud in the past year within their organization, but had prevented it. I'd love to know a few more details about that. If people could put in the chat or in the questions about how they went about doing that. But so Louise, your reaction to that, is that where you expected people would be?
Interesting. Only 13 yes and a substantial loss. But as you just sort of intimated, Jake, the most successful fraud is the one that doesn't get caught, right? They get away with the money. So that's the amazing one. It only gets caught really retrospectively when it's too late. And as a fraud expert pointed out to me recently, almost nobody gets their money back, right? It's gone. It's gone. They're clever. They disappear. You know, if we're going to talk case studies, it's quite an old one, but actually there was a headline not that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, which was fraudsters sent Google and Facebook £100 million worth of fraudulent invoices and they paid them. And it obviously wasn't as simple as that. But if companies as big as Google and Facebook can be done for, taken for $100 million, any of us can basically. So I think, yes, but we prevented it is brilliant. I would love to know why, how. That would be really interesting to know. And substantial loss, only 13%. That's great. And the ones that we don't know of, yeah, I think that's quite an interesting spread there. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you guys think about that, Conrad? Your
Well,
reaction?
if you add it up, that's basically 90% of people are being impacted in one way or another by these efforts, right? Which
Yeah.
is that doesn't surprise me at all. And sometimes the fraudsters send us, do it with a small transaction to just try and like once they get that bank account changed, the small transaction is, it often goes under the radar and then the big ones come through. But yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Oh, great. We've got some people reacting in the chat now. Kathy Lovett says that they had a fraud attempt in the form of an email notification of a supplier's bank account change. As I've been in my role for a number of years, the sender email looked not only odd to me, but remembered the previous attempts from the same false email address. She says he phoned a trusted supplier contact to alert them of the new attempt, and they were grateful. So that's that human contact that you mentioned there, Louise. Someone else, Tracy Stepazek, I hope I'm saying that right, says that they received an email that the vendor bank information was changing. One simple phone call to that vendor who really appreciated being informed, and they got the police involved immediately. So that looks like that, yeah, that human interaction is it looks like it's key in terms of preventing any kind of fraud that people are seeing here. I'm just conscious of the time here, and we're kind of getting towards the end here, and I'm just really keen that the audience is left with some sort of last tips really before we finish. So I'd really like to give the panel a chance to give everyone one takeaway key piece of advice to avoid fraud in 2026. So, Conrad, your takeaway thought for the audience, please.
I would say, maybe this is too self-serving, but give us a call. Let's go into more detail and talk about automation techniques so that, I mean, these phone calls are great, but what I've seen in high volume transactional stuff, it's very easy when you're just cranking on things to start sort of missing the details and the subtleties of being in, so really narrowing that manual work down to a small percentage of high risk scenarios is where that manual touch is most meaningful. So lots of automation, data, and technology that we can bring to the table to help here. There's other companies that can help as well. But yeah, don't just rely on your own brute force power here. It's a challenge, and if anything, it's going to get more difficult with AI. People can present themselves even on a video call like this as someone that they're not.
Sure.
And it's really important to get to use the technology and get ahead of the curve.
Okay, Luke, what are your practical steps that people can put in place to avoid fraud in 2026?
Yeah, so we talked a lot in the beginning about onboarding, right? You've got to make sure they don't come in the front door, right? Getting your processes in place. But I think even just from the comments, what we see is most attempts come from your existing suppliers. So do not lose track of, hey, we've got a great onboarding process. We're vetting, we're checking. Well, guess what? One email's compromised, and now your existing vendor that you think you trust is at risk, right? So I would just say, again, if you don't have a process today, get one. We can help you automate it, make it more secure on the onboarding side. But again, always have your flags up for any change requests coming in from existing suppliers, because I think that's where most people are seeing these attempts.
Okay, thank you. Louise, what do you want people to be thinking about to avoid fraud in 2026?
I think two important things. Be suspicious, really be suspicious. Um, Question things. And don't be afraid. Three things really. Be suspicious, especially when there's urgency or senior people copied, because that's about trying to create urgency and speed and make you do something that you will be out of process or workaround. But also, I think there needs to be a culture in an organization, which is that we would rather you flagged a fraud and it wasn't a fraud, but we checked it, than you were frightened to say anything and actually something slipped through and millions of pounds or dollars went out the door that shouldn't have done. So train your staff. They need to know what it is. They need to know what fraud is to be able to spot it. Don't be beguiled by urgency. That's what they're relying on, human behavior, wanting to do the right thing and copying senior people. And keep a lookout, be suspicious. Those are my three tips.
Yeah, and
Please,
Jay, can I add one more?
of
What's
course.
interesting is this is a two-way street, right? You want to protect yourselves. The suppliers want to be protected as well. They want to do business with companies that are going to protect them, make sure that they get paid. And I know there's there can be friction in this. We help eliminate that friction to make it pretty seamless. But suppliers want to do business with companies that they can trust as well. So keep that in mind, and helping your suppliers understand that is crucial as well. It's a partnership.
Okay, that's great. I think time is kind of ticking across, so we have to wrap it up there. So thank you very much to our guests today, Conrad Smith, co-founder and CEO of Graphite Connect. Thank you as well to Luke Wolf, solutions engineer at Graphite Connect. and Louise Graham, COO at IFOL. Thank you very much for your insights and tips. Really useful for the audience. Thank you as well to you, the audience, for joining us. I always say in these things, you only get out what you put in. So a big thank you for all of your interactions, involvements, sharing your stories, and your questions. Really useful. And you can find out more information about what we've discussed today on the IFOL website, as well as information about IFOL membership as well. This webinar is going to be available on the website too this week, so please do share it for anyone who wasn't able to join it. But thanks again for joining us. I'm Jay Videlingham, and until the next time, we'll say goodbye. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.